May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives. Doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, John Nelson, John K. Nelson, not to be confused with our dear beloved late Zen Center student friend, John E. Nelson, John Eric Nelson. John Nelson, I met this John Nelson, John K. Nelson, Professor Nelson, when he invited me to be a guest at his class at the University of San Francisco College of Arts and Sciences. They were studying Thank You and Okay, an American Zen failure in Japan. And I went back a few times. And I remember once I went back just to meet with his class, and Kodriga went with me. And he, at one point, he was just showing stuff on a slide. You know, he was just showing slides, say, on a projector or something. And we were commenting on them. Yeah, well, what's your take on this or whatever? And he brought up one that was a conversation between D.T. Suzuki and Hisamatsu. Hisamatsu was in Boston at the same time as D.T. Suzuki. And I knew about him because they were both on the board of the Cambridge Buddhist Association, founded by L.C. Mitchell, and she had talked about them. They were both Buddhist scholars, and one of them taught at MIT and one taught at Harvard. Anyway, the quote was, the two of them are talking, one of them says to the other, "Have you ever met a Westerner who understands this material?" You know, they're talking about Zen, Buddhism and stuff. And the other one says, "No, I haven't." And the one who said it said, "I haven't either." So John asked me what's my take on that, and I said, well, yeah, I understand neither one of them has met a Westerner who's Japanese. And I've thought about that some. I mean, in a sense, I guess there's truth to that. But that's not the way I view existence. I mean, I think what we've gotten from Japan is wonderful, and I'm extremely grateful for it. And yeah, I think Japan, China, Asian cultures and Asian thought in general is. I'd hate to. I'm sure glad I ran into it. That's what I say. And there are some terrible flaws with. You know, in the West, but there are in these too. But basically, I feel that all beings are on a spiritual trip, and we can find the truth from everybody, because everybody is, as Shunryu Suzuki said, wisdom, seeking wisdom. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about John Nelson. Now, this is from his bio for the University of San Francisco, where he was a professor emeritus. So he left there a while back, and he'll be talking about that. You know, he went to Oregon, and he's up in God, where are you now? Vancouver or something like that? Anyway, we talk about it. So it says, John Nelson is a professor, or was, you should update your site, people, of East Asian religion in the Department of Theology and Religious Studies, University of San Francisco. Oh, that's a Catholic university, I think, right? Yeah. He is the author of Experimental Buddhism, Innovation and Activism in Contemporary Japan. Co-winner of the 2014 Numata Prize for Outstanding Book in Buddhist Studies. 2 books on Shinto in Contemporary Japan, A Year in the Life of a Shinto Shrine, and Enduring Identities, The Guise of Shinto in Contemporary Japan. Also, numerous articles and has produced 2 short documentary videos, Spirits of the State, Japan's Yasukuni Shrine. God, I've never been there. I'm sorry. Next time. And Japan's Rituals of Remembrance, 50 years after the Pacific War. He co-edited the reference volume titled Handbook of Contemporary Japanese Religions, Brill 212. So, and he has received extended research fellowships from the Japan Foundation, as well as the Social Science Research Council, the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, the Fulbright Foundation, and the Niwano Foundation. During the 2013 sabbatical year, he spent 7 months traveling through Japan, Indonesia, India, Nepal, Turkey, Greece, and Germany. Along the way, he gave 6 public lectures, was visiting faculty in Sanata Dharma University in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, had numerous adventures, and gained a greater understanding of the relationship between religion and globalization. His travel blog and many photos can be found at nelsonjblog.wordpress.com. So that mentions the Yogyakarta thing. That's what I call Jogja when we're talking. That's like the intellectual capital of Indonesia, and it's in the middle of Java. And as I say, when we're talking there, that there's only 2 places outside of Bali that Katrinka and I have been. One is to Gili Air for our 11-day honeymoon on this little tiny island where there's no dogs, no cars, there's only a couple of electric motorbikes. There's donkeys on carts, but they shouldn't even do that. You can walk everywhere in a few minutes. Anyway, that's sort of cool. I wouldn't want to be there if there was a tsunami, because there's the highest thing is the Muslim mosque, which is about 30 feet high. Anyway, the other place we've been is Yogyakarta, and mainly to Borobudur. Well, there were a number of sites in that area that were good, not just Borobudur. But Borobudur is the largest, what would you say, Buddhist archaeological site in the world. And it was great. We really enjoyed that area. So it says, in February 2016, Nelson was interviewed as an expert on the Shinto religion for a Canadian broadcasting system program, Tapestry. The interview is live on CBC's English language online service. Listen, I'll put a link to that on his Cuke page on Cuke.com. In 2015, Nelson appeared on the New Books in Buddhism podcast on the New Books Network to speak about his book, Experimental Buddhism, Innovation and Activism in Contemporary Japan, which is available for free on iTunes. All right. So, and then it says research areas: cultural anthropology, Asian studies, visual anthropology, religious studies. Anyway, that gives you an idea who he is. Anyway, and he really gets around and he gets involved in the practice, as you will see. He's he's got a very strong scholarly component, and he's got a very strong seeker, practicer component. So, all right, look, let's give John a call. We had a little trouble on this call. It was my USB port, this one and the one before and another one. Finally, I discovered it was the port, and I just stopped using that port. I've got 3 ports. And I do get problems with Skype cutting off and other problems. But we just talk mainly about, I don't know, we talk all over the place about religion, about Hinduism, Buddhism, Japan, Indonesia, Islam. And I want to get him back and have him talk about Zen, especially Soto Zen, but he knows a lot about Zen in Japan. And so I'm going to ask him to come back and do that, because we really didn't get into that much because, because my port finally gave out and we gave up. But there's enough here for starters. And listen, enjoy it. And after we've had our pause to meditate, we'll give John Nelson a call. So when you hear the bell, if you're of such a mind, hit pause and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And we'll be here to hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever. And we'll give John K. Nelson a call.
Is anybody there?
Hi, John.
Hey, David. How you doing?
All right.
I can hear you fine.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
Good.
It's amazing that we're talking to each other. You're in Bali and I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, and you sound like you're next door.
I know. It's true.
Okay, at that point, John and I started talking about this and that I have eliminated. And then I just asked him, hey, tell me what you're doing.
The center where I'm affiliated at the moment is called the Center for Studies in Religion and Society. And it's part of the University of Victoria, which is a satellite university for the British Columbia University system. It's the same system that is in Vancouver and a couple other places. But here it's a very nicely thought out, more modern university. I think it started in 1961, but the university is organized into a circle. And so there's a road that goes around the outside of the circle. And then right in the center of the circle, the campus is divided into humanities and sciences. And so all the scientists stay on their half of the circle, and humanities people stay on the other side. Humanities, social science, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
So we're at the edge of the social sciences, humanities part, and my office looks into a beautiful grove of trees with nice grass. It's just a gorgeous office, really, really nice. And we've been talking about climate change and spirituality and science, because the presenter this week he is a biologist from Oregon State University in Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
And I'm the other Oregon guy from Eugene, and I gave a talk 2 weeks ago, I guess 1 week ago, on my big trip through Asia in 2013, 2014. And at that time, you were not in Bali, right? 2013.
We came here on December 9th, 2013.
Oh, December 9th. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was already gone from Bali by that time.
I know.
Well,
sorry
okay.
to miss you.
Yeah, sorry to miss you. That would have been fun. But anyway, my talk title is Adventures with Religions in Contemporary Asia. And it takes my travel blog from 2013, 2014, and then inserts into that some religious studies scholarship about, well, why do the Balinese spend 2.5 days on a big cremation ritual in Ubud and then they burn everything? I mean, it's just amazing what I saw for a politician's wife.
You saw quite a ceremony. I mean, that's a great photo you sent. You saw a really good, big, important ceremony.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
But I saw a lot of other stuff too. And so the religious studies scholarship is trying to explain some of that, to raise the level of literacy that people have about Asia, which is pretty damn low, because they're just the American general public, they're concerned about their TV shows and maybe a little bit about climate change. But, there's 30 to 40 million people who are right-wing Republicans, and they just don't give a shit about anything except what they read through their websites and on the Trump social media site. So I kind of consider them to be a lost cause. If I meet them, I will argue with them and try to instill some doubt. But
you will?
Man, they're hardcore.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, I have to, because otherwise I feel guilty about it. So,
yeah. Well, there's only a couple of people I know here who are Trumpers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's two, and one of them is a monk. He's from New York. No, he's from Ohio, but he was with Philip Kaplo's group for 9 years, and he was in Myanmar monastery for 7 years, in Sri Lanka. He's ordained, and it almost seems like organic to me. He just tends to be fixated on disinformation and really gets into it. And so he drops by. I might have had more visits from him than any foreigner.
Oh, really?
And we just don't talk about those things. I mean, he knows how I feel. He's the only person I've really gotten angry with, but it doesn't help. It's hopeless.
No.
And anti-vaxxer. Both those people are anti-vaxxers and believe all sorts of crap. But anyway, the funny thing is they're both nice people. This guy doesn't have a wicked bone in his body. He's very generous. And that woman is really involved with a social service program. I mean, I know it's really weird. It's like a virus, I think.
It's a virus that takes over a part of a person's mind, but not all of their mind.
Yeah.
And it's a virus that will affect, like, your left leg, and you just say, well, okay, that's my left leg. That's the way it is, and write it off.
Yeah.
And you limp around. But I think at the end of their life, they will come to face with the deception that they have bought into, and they will have a huge, humanitarian and spiritual crisis. I just cannot believe that at the end of their life, when they're facing death, that they won't come to terms with how they've lived their life and the falsehoods that they have spread, and the monk especially.
It's what happens to people. I mean, I read a book called Something in the Madness of Crowds when I was in high school about cults and, people start believing crazy things. And also, it's spreading and here in Indonesia, well, it was sort of a political thing, but anyway, when there was a communist coup attempt in 65, 66, they got into mass murdering people, especially Chinese, all over the island, and it just got totally out of hand, And Bali,
it was a bloodbath.
Yeah, Bali killed the highest percentage too.
Man!
And but there's I remember in Japan when the earthquake happened. I think Japanese are really subject to this. I don't know why, but when the earthquake and terrible fire happened in 1930, they were massacring Koreans because they said they were responsible.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And you can just look, almost any society has the ability to go crazy. And the literalists and fanatics in religion are always a danger. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's very true. We could certainly talk about that when we do an interview, if you'd like to. I'm fairly well versed in that, as well as, I wouldn't say fighting back, but at least taking a stand in a public discussion with a person who is very radically different and would like to probably see me dead, but not to shy away from that person, not to shy away, and do something to kind of at least make them curious about where they're getting their information from. So I've had those encounters recently. In fact, just on the street yesterday, we met this elderly gentleman who was from Ottawa and came out here about 25 years ago. And he, we had a nice chat with him and his little dog, and it was probably 7 o'clock in the morning, and the sun was just coming up. And at the end of the conversation, we probably talked for 7-8 minutes. He just dropped a bomb and said, "Oh, and by the way, I'm an evangelical, and I love the Lord." And, oh man, for me, that is a warning sign. My wife, Miko, she just wanted to run away from him at that point. But I said, "Well, I've taught religious studies for about 25 years, and I'd love to talk with you about your religious beliefs." And he kind of reacted in a way that I saw was surprising to him. I could see his eyes get big and his head rolled back just a little bit. And he probably didn't expect that. He probably expected me to say, "Well, I think you're full of shit," or something else. But, evangelicals, they have to take a public stand and profess their faith every chance they get. Otherwise, they're not going to get in the pearly gates. And so I could tell him in a future conversation, "Well, hi, Dave, how are you? How's your salvation going?" And that would probably be a good way to start the conversation. I hope that doesn't sound too cynical, but I do believe that every person has the ability to change their mind.
You're the opposite of cynical.
Huh?
You're an optimist. I know you because you were a professor of religious studies, East Asian studies, at San Francisco University, right?
University of San Francisco.
Right, University of San Francisco. And you called me in because I think the first time we met, because you were using Thank You and Okay in your class on what? On Zen?
On Zen, yeah.
Well, that's very kind of you. You've always been very high I've always held you in
It's a
very
great
high
book. It's a
esteem.
wonderful book.
and I came back and other times. And so we've been in touch ever since then. And I have followed your career somewhat and your writings.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I usually, when I do a podcast, I start off by asking people what they're doing right now, rather than, getting in the past. But I do want to know everything from the past that you'll tell me. So clarify what you are doing right now. That sounded very interesting, the university you were involved with.
Right. So I'm a research fellow at the Center for Studies in Religion and Society at the University of British Columbia in Victoria, British Columbia. And this is a 3-month appointment. It could be longer if I wanted it to, but I am going to return to Eugene, Oregon, where we are living after 21 years in the San Francisco Bay Area. We lived in the North Bay, north of Berkeley, in a little town called Albany. And we pulled out of there in 2021 because I was encouraged to retire by the dean, and I was pretty much ready. That was about a year of teaching online because of the COVID situation. And I had also given up my administrative role as the academic director for a master's program in Asia Pacific Studies. And so if you go back 10 years, 2013, 2014, that was a sabbatical that was my round the world trip from San Francisco to Hawaii, to Japan, to Bali, to Java, and then onward to India, Nepal, Turkey, and Greece, and ended up in Germany. So that trip was fermented, not fermented, but fermented because my vacations were all town, was because it was right after the 2009 to 2012 recession that we had in the U.S. because of subprime mortgage rates and banking weird. And all these major funding agencies took a big hit, took like a 25 to 30% hit on their investment. So they had money to give out. And plus I was a senior academic and they weren't going to give me much anyway. So I just decided, well, all right, I'm just going to take this big trip. My wife said, go ahead, do it. And I was on the road for about 8 months. So during that trip, I kept a pretty detailed travel blog, and it's just been sitting there for 10 years because when I came back to the university, they put me in charge of this graduate program that needed to be rescued. So we rescued it. We made a video and so on, and we got probably 30 students in 2 different classes, and I was quite proud of that work. And plus, it was fun to teach graduate students too. And I taught 1 class a year for graduate students and 1 class for undergraduates. And the rest of it was administrative work, which I did not like and which was hard to do, but did it anyway. So that all ended in 2021. The dean encouraged me to retire. We sold our house for an amazing amount of money, and we moved to Eugene. And that was a very good timing for this move because I still have friends at the university, and they say it's changed so much, and the student population has changed so much. And I'll find out about that when I teach a class next spring at the University of Oregon. So in January 2024, the winter quarter, I'm going to teach a class in Japanese religions, and then following that is a seminar on Zen. And it's interesting. This is the last thing I'll say about my background for now, but it's interesting that in Eugene, they have 2 different Zen temples. One is a Soto Shu temple, Soto lineage temple, and the other one is a Rinzai temple. And the Rinzai temple is downtown, run out of an old house, and they have one floor in the old house. The Soto temple is in the suburbs, and pretty expansive suburban house that has been transformed into a temple. And so I asked the students when I gave a talk in the class in I guess it was the fall of 2021. All the students were wearing masks, of course, and I was wearing a mask too, so that was kind of weird. But I asked them, I said, how many of you know that there is a Zen temple in town? And I think out of a group of about 28 students, about 3 or 4 raised their hands. And so they knew about it. And so I asked these 3 or 4 students, I said, well, have you ever been there? And nobody raised their hand. And so for me, you have to interact with the tradition however you can. And the instructor has to be clever enough to come up with different ways to do this, whether it's starting your own Zazen practice or learning a ritual or doing a pilgrimage on campus. I mean, there's many different ways you can interact with the tradition, but so far they hadn't done any of that, and it was all textual learning. And I just thought, they're missing what's going on. So when I teach the class, I want to take my students to the Zen temple and tell them, well, this is an example of Japanese religions in practice. And then when I teach the Zen seminar, we'll go back to the same temple, but in a different way, and look at more of the tradition of meditation and teachings too. But yeah, so anyway, I'm looking forward to it. And then maybe next fall, I'll have another appointment someplace else in the world. But I've just turned 70 and I'm semi-retired, but I'm not giving up yet.
Oh, good. That's good. Now, which temple did you go to? Both temples, or?
I have been to the temple called Buddha Eye, and that is the Soto Zen temple. The other one downtown, the Rinzai temple, that is it's a more modern temple. They do meditation at 9:00 in the morning on Sunday morning, and that's early for them or early for their clientele. But I haven't been there yet. But I'll be going there very soon once we get back.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what the lineage is. And what's the lineage? Remind me. Actually, I have it, and you've told me before, but I forget who's the teacher. What's the lineage in the Eugene Soto group?
In the Soto Zen group, it's a little bit not mainstream lineage. It's a lineage that goes through Sendai, Japan, where the head monk trained and was ordained and had a long relationship with his teacher. And as far as I know, he never went to Eiheiji or Sojiji, and has picked up stuff along the way. I mean, he started the temple 21 years ago and has gradually built it up into this very active, very inclusive Eugene-style Buddhist temple. It's a training temple. It's a training temple for young priests.
Oh, really?
I think it's more focused on their education and well-being, and the Sangha kind of tags along for the ride. There's a lot of ritual involved, which I think is a fine thing, but sometimes it's a little bit over the top, I guess you could say, from my perspective. But my perspective is based on San Francisco Zen, Sonoma Mountain Zen Center, north of the city with Kwang Roshi, and being in Japan, going to temples in Japan. So I think, it's a little complicated, our relationship, but hopefully I'll have more time to work on it.
Well, you have been involved some with practice there with sitting or something, as I recall.
Yes.
Yeah. Right?
I feel like my whole life I've been sitting. Yes.
Right. And I also recall you saying something I definitely sympathize with. I don't remember how you said it or how you wrote it, that, sitting daily is very important to you. And Um, how would you say that now?
Well, I think it's still very important, but I have a different attitude about it. And I think one of the big black boxes of contemporary Zen is the word enlightenment. And many people get into Zen because, they want to be enlightened, they want to be awake, they want to experience their life fully. And certainly, sitting Zazen helps with that. Whether or not it's going to deliver you to that destination remains another matter of concern. But I do think that if you have a regular practice and you sit by yourself and you sit with people and you sit in institutions, you develop a flexibility and also a real grounding that wherever you sit, that's your home. That's where you are. That's where your body is. That's where your mind is, your spirit is. And that can be anywhere. So I feel like that is a wonderful thing that I have learned throughout my life about Zen in particular, and Zen and Buddhisms in the plural. And I do put an S on the word because I don't think there is anything that you can call in the monolithic sense by itself Buddhism.
That's right. I certainly agree with that.
But that's true for all religions.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
All right, well, good.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I've been promoting in the last, ever since my world trip, is that, this is so silly to talk about Buddhism in the singular. And really it's a kind of Orientalist practice to be removed from the context of these various religions and look at it from the outside and say, oh, well, it's all Buddhism. And it's not. There's so much difference between the Buddhism of Nepal or Japan or Chinese countryside or downtown Los Angeles or wherever. It's just radically different. And yet there are elements of continuity between all these different places.
Right.
And the same thing is true about Christianity.
Right.
The same thing is true about Islam, Hinduism. Oh my gosh, Hinduism is all over the map right now with the right-wing Hindutva coming out of India and Modi.
Oh, yeah.
And so my book that I'm working on about these adventures with religions, that's a provocative word, but I want people to raise their literacy about Asia and Asian religions.
Yeah.
And for example, the Islam that you see in Indonesia, to me, there are three types. There's a traditional Islam that maybe was practiced 30, 40 years ago. And then there's Saudi money that has flowed into the country and rebuilt some big mosques and encouraged people to wear robes and the hijab. And then there's a kind of patriotic Islam that can draw from those first two categories whenever there's a big political contest. And I think that sense of using religion as a political tool is something that Erdogan in Turkey and Modi in India, they both came to power in the same year, 2014. They both came to power at the same time. That I think politicians they can't resist. They have to mess around in that dynamic. How can we use religion as a tool to keep power and to get the stuff done that we want to have done?
Yeah.
So I see that in Indonesia. I see it in Turkey. I see it in India. And that's not the kind of Islam that you see in Saudi Arabia or Dubai or places like that.
Yeah.
So that's a long diatribe there.
Yeah. I see another type of Islam. That's the sort of, like growing up in America, I knew, I did not grow up in a traditional Christian home at all, more like a New Thought Christianity, like Ernest Holmes, Church of Religious Science sort of thing, Christian Science and all that. So sort of mind-only Christianity, I call it. But I knew people who were true believers in Catholicism or their Baptist church or whatever. It was never a problem. But most of the people that I knew it was just something their parents did and they went along with it. It was something was happening.
Right.
They really didn't think about it much. And I think a lot of the Muslims I know are in that category.
Yeah, really.
I deal with Muslims a lot here, and I really don't prefer Hindus to Muslims in most ways. You know, they're all good people. Everybody here is, I mean, it's just people here in general are pretty easygoing and are polite with each other. You know, I've never seen road rage with all the terrible traffic problems we have. It's cooperative, and there aren't any police to speak of. I mean, you never see police coordinating it. People do a wonderful job. But anyway, but the fanatics, Muslims in Indonesia are a problem for those like the Muslim president now, Jokowi. But, you know, they're always having to throw them bones there, give them, legislation they want, like that recently, making it illegal to have sex outside of marriage. And nobody's going to enforce it. And even the way the law is written, it's only, you can only report a family member and you've got to have proof and stuff. But, it's interesting watching it. The Hindus though are definitely more, they're not interested in converting other people and, are
Right.
passing laws to make everybody, do what they should do. And most Muslims aren't either, but they'll go along with it,
Yeah. Well, I just think that people who might pick up the book and read it because they're interested in Asia, or they traveled there, or they took a class in Asian religions, or they like my writing style, which is, it's personal, but it's also kind of intellectual because I go off on these side tracks, like when I went to Borobudur, and I had taken a hike the day before, about 40 kilometers away, and our young guide didn't know the trail. So we went up this long valley where there was a Hindu temple, an old Hindu temple at the top of this valley. And he said, well, we're going to go up this ridge and then over the ridge to the other side, and then we'll be picked up in the car. But there was no trail. We started off on a trail and it got dimmer and dimmer. And then instead of going back like we should have, and like I recommended, he said, well, let's just keep going. We'll find a trail. We'll find a trail. And the other two people on the trip were two Ukrainian young men, and they were 20, 30 years younger than me. I was 60 at the time. They were probably in their 40s or in their 30s. And they said, no, we can do it. We'll tough it out. But it just got wetter and muddier and steeper and rockier and more dangerous until finally we were just sliding down the same slope we tried to get up. We couldn't do it. And we were grabbing onto bamboo and just sliding from one bamboo to the other.
Oh,
and that's
God.
when my knee went out. It hit a rock. And, oh, man, it was so painful. But I put it on ice that evening, and then I put it on ice when I got to Borobudur, to a hotel right there by the temple. And for the first 2 days, I didn't even go to the temple. I just had my knee on ice. But they had a wonderful library. And that whole library used to be the World Heritage Research Center that they created for all these scientists. So they had this wonderful research library. And I could just study and study and study about this amazing temple. So I felt like, okay, this is a wonderful thing here, and don't complain about your knee, and it'll be okay eventually. So it took about 3 days before I finally got to the temple. But by the time I got there, my head was full of the stories about what the temple was trying to do. There are all these relief carvings around the temple on the different terraces that you approach as you get higher and higher. The whole thing is laid out like it's a mandala with different directions representing different Buddhas, and the Buddhas representing having different mandalas and hand gestures. So it just was very moving for me emotionally to get all that background information, and then to try to write about it in a way that people would not just say, oh, this is too much detail, I don't care about this, but to make it sort of dramatic with one Hindu regime ending because the volcanoes blew up, and then the Buddhist regime ending because the volcanoes blew up.
Oh, is that right?
So, I mean, in the future, is there a possibility that Indonesia will have some, I won't say chance, but that sounds too scheming, really. But I mean, the volcanoes are going to blow up again eventually. There's just no way to stop them.
There's always volcanoes going off in Indonesia.
Yeah, but sometimes they just bury the landscape with, meters and meters of ash.
Right, or a big volcano going off like Krakatoa can change world history.
Change everything.
Yeah.
So the question I have for Indonesia is there some way to manage their heritage, their cultural heritage as a modern nation that combines Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam, and I think there's a shamanic tradition at the base of all that, where their ancestors remain to be very important.
Yes.
So how to do that skillfully, that would be I think it would be a way to provide relief for the entire nation if there ever is a disaster like that. And I think at some point there will be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah.
That's one chapter of the book. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the working title, if you've got one?
The working title is Far West Passage, and Far West is a challenge to the notion of Far East from Europe. And, they've always talked about, we have to go to the Far East and Far East. And I hear students in California talk about Far East, and I say, wait a minute. You mean the Far East as in Europe? Oh, no, I mean the Far East as in China or Japan. And I said, well, what about the West? You're on the West Coast here, and that whole conception of the world is very Orientalistic. And we don't really need to get into Orientalism as a type of perspective, but that is something that still remains quite active in the mindsets of a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can go into it if you want to, but I'd rather not.
Well, I'm interested in all of it.
Yes, that's your strong point, David.
Yeah. Hang on a second.
You're
My
an
beloved
omnivore.
wife just brought me a matcha latte, darling. Thank you. Hey, this is John Nelson.
Hi, John Nelson.
Could you hear her?
Hello.
He says hello.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Yeah. She remembers you well. Goody, wasn't that nice of her? We don't travel around Indonesia much. For us, going a few hours to Ahmed or someplace is a serious vacation. But we did go to Borobudur. We really liked Jogja, and we loved the temples in that area and some really interesting museums and cultural stuff and also it's more sophisticated than Bali. It's like the intellectual capital.
Right.
And we really like Jogjakarta, I guess, and Borobudur, and there were some other temples and near there. There was a Buddhist I happened to stumble on right next to one of the places where it's part of the standard, like temples to see. There was like a monastic school or something, and it was very active, and I went in, and Katrinka and I went in and looked it over. But Bora, we really loved, we spent, oh God, all day there walking around and going up it and around it. And you know what? You can't do that anymore. They fenced it.
Oh, they did. Oh,
yeah, that's recent.
You can't walk on the building?
No, that's what I've heard. I've heard there was just too much wear and tear, and
Yeah, well, I can see that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I feel fortunate then that I was able to go there.
Yeah.
And the monastery that you're talking about, I think, is arranged on some kind of religious grid that connects that monastery to another temple further out. But it's like in Japan, where you have the area south of Kyoto, south of Osaka, the Kii Peninsula, and that whole peninsula is a big mandala. And so any of the trails that you take in that peninsula, you're walking this mandala as you're getting closer to the center of it, which is this big shrine, the Kumano shrines, and then there's a gigantic waterfall, like 630 feet or something in that area. But the whole area, including the Ise Grand Shrines, is part of this mandalization of the landscape. So I think the same thing happened at Borobudur, where the outlying temples, and some of them were destroyed in the big volcanic eruptions, but the one that you went to is still part of that religious grid. So, I mean, stuff like that really fascinates me because that connects with the land. And I come from a small town in the center of Kansas, Little River. It's about 450 people. Well, it's probably more living there now, maybe 500 people living there now. But when I was a kid growing up, we'd walk out in the countryside and we would find arrowheads and pottery, Indian pottery, and, well, not Indian, Native American pottery, spear points. And that made us realize, well, we're recent arrivals here. There are people that lived here long before us.
Right.
But you never studied anything like that in school. And certainly no history about the white settlers coming in and blowing the Indians out of there. So
yeah,
what I did right after I retired was to write a book about growing up in central Kansas. And in one of the chapters, I reference the anthropological and more archaeological writings and publications of this gentleman who grew up not so far away, probably 50 miles away from Little River, but he did a big excavation just like 3.5 miles outside of town, sponsored by the Smithsonian Institution. He was the lead archaeologist for the Midwest for the Smithsonian. And this took place in the early 60s. So he discovered not only villages and some chain mail from the Spanish conquistadors that went through there looking for the 7 cities of gold. The conquistador's name was Coronado.
Yeah.
And that happened right there in that area. But also they discovered council circles, and these are ceremonial circles in each of these 2 villages that were about 3 miles apart. And the council circles align with each other and also align with the winter solstice and the summer solstice. And that is the place where the sun is at its most extreme, right, on the horizon. So when the sun, let's say the sun comes up in the wintertime and shines into this opening of the council circle on both of the villages, and then the other way in the summertime. And then later on, they discover a carving on top of the ridge of this giant serpent with its jaws open, and the upper jaw points to the winter solstice, the lower jaw points to the summer solstice. And it aligns with the counter circle. Anyway, that just blew me away. And the archaeologist himself, his name is Waldo Waddell, and he's passed away in the late 80s or early 90s. But he says, in all of the Midwest, there's no other place that has this configuration of council circles, alignment with the solstices, and the carving on top of the hill. So I put all of that into one chapter. And that was great fun to work with that material and to kind of fictionalize it just a little bit, make them into living beings having a conversation, a radio interview actually, that took place in the early 1980s. So that's one chapter in the book.
All right. Now, what's this book? What's the title of this book?
The book doesn't have a title yet, but it's in the process of being of maturing, I guess you could say. I finished the manuscript, but I'll get back to it in the springtime. So
yeah.
The other books I've done are Experimental Buddhism, Innovation and Activism in Contemporary Japan. That was published in November of 2013 when I was on the road, and I didn't even see the book until I got back in 2014. But that book was nominated for a prize called the Numata Prize.
Oh, that's an important one.
That's a big prize, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the outstanding book in Buddhist studies for a given year. So I shared the prize with another scholar who wrote about how meditation in Myanmar, or called Burma then, was an act of resistance against the British occupation. And a couple months just decided, well, we're going to teach meditation to the entire public and not keep it in the monasteries. So that's really a fascinating study as well. So we shared the prize and we gave a joint lecture at Berkeley in 2014, and that was a very memorable part of my career. But before that, I worked on Shinto in Japan and published 2 books on that. One is on a shrine in Kyoto, a very old shrine that is the number 2 shrine in the whole country. I mean, there's like, I don't know, 60,000 Buddhist temples. Now, I think there's like 80,000 Shinto shrines in Japan currently. And this shrine in Kyoto is called Kamigamo Shrine, the Kamo Shrine,
right,
way up in the northeast corner of the city.
Right.
And it's the number 2 shrine in Japan after Ise. Ise is number 1 and Kamo Shrine is number 2.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yep. And the first book I did is on a shrine in Nagasaki that was published in 1996, I believe. And
what's it called?
That book is.
You've got to say the titles.
Okay. The second book, the second book that was my dissertation is called Enduring Identities, the Guise of Shinto in Contemporary Japan. And I like the word guise because it's part of the word disguise. And Shinto has this slippery quality to it where it presents itself as a religion of nature and, we're the indigenous religion of Japan. And they kind of cover up some of their politics, which connects with World War II and the emperor and that whole nasty business of trying to become a colonial power. But Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo is still in the Shinto. I wouldn't say it's in the Shinto hierarchy, but it's underneath the tent of Shinto in Japan, which the right wing is also under the Shinto tent in Japan. And
right.
Patriotism.
Yeah.
The right wing and all of that.
And the Yakuza, the gangsters.
Yakuza, right? That's right.
And so, the police somewhat, huh?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
and the LDP, the politicians somewhat.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And anyway, the first book is called A Year in the Life of the Shinto Shrine, and that was published in 1996. And that's more of a first-person observation and participation in the yearly cycle of rituals that one major shrine enacts. So the book is divided into 4 parts: spring, summer, fall, winter, and I described most of the major rituals that took place, as well as the personalities that were involved. So it's a very lively book. It's sold probably around 12,000 copies, which is pretty good for an academic publication. And it's still in print. They're all still in print. So you can find them on Amazon or wherever it is you look for books, and they should be in your library too.
Wow. That's pretty good.
And I have a documentary film on Yasukuni Shrine.
You made it?
Yep, I made it.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really? You probably told me,
Yeah.
but if you did, I forgot.
That's okay.
Can we see the documentary film?
You can see it. You can see rather long trailers. And if you see the trailer and you want to see the film, you should probably contact me instead of paying what the company that is distributing the film is asking right now. So they have
What are they asking?
possibilities.
What are they asking?
I think they're asking like $29 to stream the film. And if you buy the film, it costs $99. And I wouldn't buy it. It's kind of amateurishly made with several cameras, but there's nothing else like it because no academic has really taken on the topic of Yasukuni Shrine. And I feel like certain things just are so obvious, but nobody's really dug into them and presented them in a way for the general public to understand or for students to understand. You know, they write papers for a limited academic audience, but at this point in time, I feel like that's sort of a vanishing need. People still do it, and there's more journals now than ever before, but the idea of paying a journal to publish your paper just is wrong to me.
Well, there's a lot of that in all types of publishing. And I beg people not to do it. They get hold of me and say, "Oh, well, for $10,000, this." I say, "Look, they just want your money. Just make it print on demand, and don't try to make money on it, and get it out there, and let people know, and it'll be there. You never know what'll happen with it."
That's right.
But as a result, that's my general attitude. We just barely get by, thanks to generous contributors like you.
Well, I wish I could give more. But.
That's also interesting to me. Well, I'm going to make sure that we have an up-to-date, well-presented page for you on Cuke.com.
Thank you.
We'll deal with that later. You said you could send me the film?
Yeah, I can send you the film. I don't have a copy with me in Victoria.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, I don't want a hard copy. Don't you have an MP4 or something?
I think I have it on a hard drive back in Eugene, Oregon.
Well, no hurry.
Yeah. So it'll be December by the time I can send it to you.
That's fine. That's fine. Listen, I can't. Okay. Sometimes I don't get back to people till December on emails and stuff. I've got to-do lists. I've got important lists. I remember in the barn where I was living with John Tarrant back, years ago. I'd find a box that said, "Important, do now," and it would have dust over it and cobwebs around.
Oh no!
Yeah, and it's still that way. Still
that way. But yeah. I think that helps your mind stay focused. It gives you motivation for having something important to do every day, and that's a great quality that many people just let fly. They don't care about it. And I know a friend who is retiring from UC Berkeley after having his career there as a professor, and he's moving to Oregon and said that he's going to stop doing his research and writing, and he's going to become an organic farmer. Well, power to him. I mean, that's great. But I just think there has to be a way to accommodate an interest in his field, which is Buddhism, Buddhist studies, with organic farming. And I don't see them as opposites at all. I see them as complementary.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Maybe
sure. But, there's different types of people, and they have different psychological needs and everything. People are so different.
No, that's true.
And maybe what will happen to him? maybe he'll find it was like an idea. I mean, there's a reason people left the farm, and that is that they could.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And but he might get into it, or he might start, getting back into the Buddhism, and might start into his studies. He might, we don't know what will happen with him. All right.
We don't know what will happen.
Yeah. I'm going to say something about Shinto and I really admire, your grasp of, the situation in Japan, and worldwide and in Asia with, religion. But so my take on things is this. In Japan, just to put it in a nutshell, people don't like Buddhism, they like Shinto. What do you think about that?
I wouldn't categorize Buddhism as a singular entity, first of all. They have the Buddhisms that they have grown up with, that their family has their affiliation with. Maybe a new community is connected to a certain type of Pure Land Buddhism, and this is a new thing for their family. So I think it's kind of temple by temple and location by location and priest by priest, because how a temple runs really depends upon the priest.
Well, I'd certainly agree with that. I'd certainly agree with that. And I was thinking that when you were talking about Japanese Buddhism, my God, it just gets down to the individual teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And not just the lineage, but they change radically within the lineage. And then it's like, as somebody, or I read once, there was a monastery in Tibet. I've never forgotten this, that when you enter it over the gate, it says 10,000 monks, 10,000 monasteries.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
And
that's right.
That's what I've seen. However, a very common experience for me in Japan, I found telling people I was there studying Zen was incomprehensible to a lot of people. Not to everybody, because I knew a lot of intellectuals and artists and different types of people that could, that appreciated it, and they had a different type of understanding. But this is a common thing. I'd say, and then your family is Buddhist. I imagine it's yes. Well, what sect? I don't know. It's the temple over there. They don't. I've just found over and over people wouldn't necessarily know what sect, and then they'd say, I'd say, well, I'm here studying Buddhism. They'd say, I'm not a good Buddhist. I haven't offered incense at my altar in a long time, and people would come into our house to study English. We learned not to light incense. They go, oh, it's that horrible smell. And what I found was they identified Buddhism and incense with death and funerals and memorial services and priests who wanted a lot of money from them to do everything and obligations.
Exactly
like that.
Right. Yep.
But, there's a certain amount of priests who want money and Shinto too, but Shinto has the birth, it has the weddings, it has life. And a woman said to me, our shrine burned down in Okayama. What are we going to do? She was just distraught. Well, it can be rebuilt. It'll be another shrine. But I don't know. It seemed to me Shinto was just really embedded in people and in the culture and everything in Japan. And so is Buddhism. It's sort of in their bones. But
sort of in their bones.
Yeah, but people seemed pretty atheistic overall to me.
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
a way that doesn't exclude spirituality, but
Right.
I mean, Buddhism
That's
is
hard for people.
atheistic, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
That type of statement is hard for North Americans, Europeans who are versed in Christianity or Catholicism to understand. They think, well, how can they possibly go to two different religions? And sometimes it's even more than that, because there's a shamanic element underneath Shinto and parts of Buddhism that I find rather fascinating. It's something you have to engage with as well. For example, I mean, in the countryside, you find these strange little altars that some farmer may have built to protect his field, or water supply going to irrigate rice. You used to find altars, many things made of bamboo growing in the area, but they were put together in such a way that you had no doubt this is an object that some person considers to have power and will protect my crop. So I feel like that is part of Japanese culture,
Yes.
a very deep part of Japanese culture. And the younger generation growing up there now references that in not by going to shrines, except when they go for New Year's or
Right.
participate in a big festival, but they reference it through anime and through manga. And there's some very popular movies.
That's good.
And
Yeah.
they have Shinto shrines and the Miko dancers, the female attendants, as a major figure. So there's a film, David, you should see called My Name.
Say it again.
That's the whole title. My Name. My Name.
Well, is it name, Name?
Yes, My Name.
And is it made by Japanese?
By Japanese animators, and it was a super popular film, probably, 7-10 years ago. But the young woman protagonist, she is connected to this Shinto shrine, and the young male protagonist, he is a student or a young employee I think he's a high school student in Tokyo, and they're both unhappy with their lives, and they want to do something different. And so through this magic charm, they switch identities, where the woman goes into the man's body and the man goes into the woman's body. And it's a fascinating film that is beautifully animated. It's just gorgeous to watch. So get your big 52-inch flat screen TV and find a version of this film and sit back and eat some popcorn and watch it.
We will. We can do that. We tend to watch something before we go to sleep. Frequently, we just get 30 minutes into it, and that's all we can do when we go to sleep. But
yeah. Well, you might have to give this one an hour before you go to sleep. You may have to give this film an hour.
Yeah, no, we
really
do. We do that too. It depends on. But I mean, I'm such a. It's hard for me to stop working, and if I can get to bed at 9, then we can do more. And but like last night, I got to bed at 10, and it's just hard for me to stop. But I will definitely keep that in mind. I mean, we could go on and on talking about Zen and religion in Japan, and we might want to go back there because especially Soto Zen. I sort of would like to go back to Soto Zen, but I'm going to, because we're talking about Shinto and Buddhism, I want to come here to Bali, where we go to Hindu ceremonies, and we go to some Hindu ceremonies that aren't available to the public. And I was talking to a builder who's a contractor, a nice old Muslim guy from Georgia, and are from near there, Central Java. I really love him. He's so great. And the thing about Muslims and dogs, well, like our plumber electrician, when he started working here, he was terrified of having our little dog near him. But Cardino, the contractor, Bonnie would just come jump in his lap. So you never know.
Oh, really?
Right. They're different. Anyway, I was telling Cardino, I said, yeah, we did this purification ceremony yesterday. I said, and they pour water over your head and make all the babies cry. It's really pretty cool.
Wow.
I said, really, I like to do that because it's what people do here. I don't believe anything. I don't think anything when I'm doing it. I just like to do it.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know what your rules are in Islam. I don't think he's a real, I don't know what his, how far into it he is. He just seems like a really solid, nice old guy who's probably younger than me. Mm-hmm. I said, if I was around, there was nothing but mosques, I would want to participate in whatever way I could without being a member. And he said, God doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that great?
That's great.
I just love that. And so there's a Muslim that doesn't fit in the typical idea, and you can run into all sorts of stuff like that. We had a yoga teacher who went to Mecca with her mother, and she was just so excited about it.
Really?
Yeah. And she gave us like an hour and a half report when she came back. She was married to a Norwegian. She's very sophisticated, but she had where she came from in Java. She had a meditation teacher. She had a Muslim guru, and she is conservative in some ways, but certainly not in others. Anyway, all right. Enough of that. I'm getting off track. All right. So here in Bali, what I notice is what people are really into is not Hinduism. They know the Hinduism. They know they'll say Yahweh. There's Brahma, there's Vishnu, there's Shiva, and they'll tell you, but they can tell you all this stuff, and then they'll say, I can't tell you how often I've heard this from Hindus here. But of course, there's only one God, and I think that's because this is a Muslim country that's like to protect them, because they can't be recognized as a religion here. Buddhism and Hinduism could not be recognized as one of the six official religions without having God on top. So Buddha's God, right? Brahma's God, but then, all right, then I notice in their daily lives, what are they doing? What's important? They're making offerings constantly to spirits. That involves them constantly, every day.
Yeah. Putting up those big bamboo poles that loop over at the top, and then there's offerings at the top of that.
Yeah, we get them.
That was what was going on in Denpasar when I first arrived. And
well, you were here during Galangan. That's every 210 days or something on their weird calendar. Right. Those things are called Punjur, Pengur, and our landlord's son, who lives 2 houses from us, puts ours together for us every time.
Oh, nice.
And our landlord and he put it in front of the house. And it stays up quite some time after Kuningam, which ends the Galangan thing. Yeah, I love them.
They're lovely. They're graceful. They're symbolic. They're rich with meaning, cultural and religious, and I think stuff like that is really important to have in a society because it gives people an orientation, and it's not coercive, but your contractor friend who said, well, God doesn't mind if you were to participate in that mosque, but the imam of the mosque may mind.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There could
Oh,
be a problem.
yeah. Well,
And there probably
yeah.
would be something to negotiate,
No,
So,
you can't. You couldn't do anything. I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I wouldn't do anything that wasn't okay. But prostrating yourselves and bowing the way they do 5 times a day, that seems like it seems like good exercise, and
right. Sure.
I have nothing against it. And a lot of it that goes on is, just like a group of guys or women who need to do it. They just gather together and do it. But I don't see a lot of that here. I mean, there is a mosque here in Sonora. We used to live near it, and I liked it because I liked hearing the calling coming out of it.
Well, when I was in the Borobudur area, there was a large mosque not far from the small hotel I was staying in where my knee was wrecked. And at 4:30 in the morning, the call to prayer came out, and it just went on and on and on. And then I could hear something about, I heard a politician's name because I saw his picture on these posters all over the place. And it seemed that the mosque was sponsoring a visit by this politician. And then I asked somebody at the hotel when I saw them for breakfast a couple hours later. And he said, oh, yeah, that happens regularly. The politicians go around to the mosques in the area, and that's a meeting place. And so during the call to prayer, they just happen to say at the very end, and by the way, later on today, so-and-so person is going to be here for a political rally or a talk or something. And that kind of, that got my attention, I guess you could say.
Yeah, sure. And people, Hindus and Christians in the area they're under a lot more pressure than they are here.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're apprehensive about that, or which way the tide will turn. Malaysia is that people are more apprehensive. It's a much bigger deal there. The thing between the Muslims and the Chinese Buddhists, but and it swings. It swings. It got really good. Right. I don't know how it is right now. It got pretty open for a while, but I haven't talked to our Malaysian Buddhist friends in a while. Anyway, what do you see here in terms of the way the religions are practiced, or the way they blend?
I was just, when I got to Yogyakarta, I was a visiting professor at a Jesuit university there. What was it called? Santa Dharma. And they have about 12,000 students, I guess, and most of them are Muslim because the country is 88% Islamic. So the lecture that I gave was on experimental religion. The title of the book that I just finished was Experimental Buddhism. So I just expanded it to experimental religion. And I cited a couple examples from the local culture of especially making Islam more political and using it as a political tool to build, I guess you could say, a movement that would affect people in a very direct way. And the Muslim students didn't like that. They said, well, that's kind of off the charts to call our religion experimental. We're getting it from the sands of Arabia. They felt like there was a direct connection between the type of Islam they were practicing, because the Quran is in Arabic. It's not in Indonesian, to my knowledge. But
No,
the
that's
whole point
probably
of
true.
the whole point of this the whole point of this is that the sponsoring professor who invited me to the university, I contacted him first, and he said, "Sure, come on over." He grew up as a Muslim, and his parents are Muslim, but his parents decided, in order for him to have a good education, he needed to go outside their religion and be educated by the Christians. And so he went to this university, got his degree, and was moved by the experience, and he became a celibate Jesuit priest.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's a big tradition. That's a big jump to make. And he is the one who told me about the story, and I was kind of flabbergasted. And he said, "Yeah, it happens more than you think, not just to professors at universities, but people all over the country." So that, I think, is maybe part of the future for Indonesia. I would love to see the country not become politicized religiously, and to be a model for other countries in the world, because it has so many Muslims, and say, look, we were able to do this and have Buddhisms and Christianities and Islams all cooperate together. Of course, Islam is the dominant religion, but we respect their perspective and their practices, and it's sort of live and let live in this multi-religious environment. I don't see why that's impossible.
Well, the problem is, like I mentioned before, it's the fundamentalists, the fanatics. Right. They've got because they can get crowds out for nothing. Everybody outraged. So they've got to deal with it. And there's lots of Christians in Indonesia. I mean, we meet Christians. We're around Christians all the time too. Well, you see, Bali is the melting pot of Indonesia.
Yeah. So that's where it cut off, and we couldn't communicate after that, except by writing. But then, I figured it all out, I think. And anyway, we're going to invite him back, huh? So thanks a lot, John Nelson. I want to get you back and just let you talk about Zen in Japan. I'll try to keep my mouth shut, which I never think I'm making a podcast. I'm just having a conversation. Actually, I cut out a lot of what I said to him because I just, we're just having a conversation. But I should forget that and just let him talk next time. And with everybody else. Okay. Until next time, this is DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita. Guest Doggett Boom Boo. New feline. She's not a small feline. Manis, and she and Bondi are getting to know each other, and Bondi is letting her. Bondi's very curious about her, but Bondi's not attacking her now. She's waiting till she gets comfortable, and because she wants to play with her like she did with dear Coochie, who died. They just played all the time, and they attacked each other. So Bondi doesn't know how to relate to a cat if she can't play with them. But Bondi is strong, and she's big, and she's going to dominate. She's got those teeth and claws and things, and, cats are cool, and dogs are like little boys. And okay, so anyway, we're all wishing you and yours a happy new year and a grand awakening.